This is going to be part 3 of how to do an idle animation. This is going to be incredibly simple. We're going to be messing around with offsetting. And offsetting is what's going to make our character feel even more alive. So for this particular assignment, I know a lot of us are doing animation for the first time. And because of that, I would say that just having a character kind of do something like this, I would say is an A on the assignment. Because what I really want you to do is just understand how a cycle works. And to quickly refresh for anyone who may be watching this out of order, really quickly, an idle is simply when the first and the last frame are lined up and there is some variation in between. But as long as the first and the last frame are linked, you will continue to have a cycle. Now, what we want, of course, is a smooth cycle so you don't see any popping. But the objective of a cycle is literally to loop in place. So if I play this, again, you have a loop. And that's what I really wanted to teach for this specific assignment. Now, to push this even further, to make this even more visually interesting, we're going to do something called offsetting. And this is actually one of the principles of art, being that you have symmetry and asymmetry. So when you have symmetry, things look very samey. Our brain is so good at processing symmetry that the second we see something that is symmetrical, we immediately look at it, process it, and then our mind goes away from that. The second we see something symmetrical, oh wow, that's a square, okay, moving on. Oh, that's a triangle, moving on. Oh, that's a circle, moving on. But if you'll notice, when you see a square that is slightly offset by even a little bit, your brain will look at it and go, oh, that's different. And your brain will literally spend a little bit more time trying to process what it is seeing. Same goes for triangles. When you see a perfect triangle, there's nothing interesting about it. So your brain is just like, that's a triangle, moving on. However, if you have a triangle that's different angles and different lengths on the sides, it makes it more visually interesting. So your brain takes a moment to look at it and be like, oh, that's different. Okay, that's different, moving on. But your brain will take the time to notice exactly what is different about it. The same thing applies to animation. So when we're playing our animation, I did have some things ever so slightly different. If you'll notice, the knees move a little bit differently because they're in a different position. I have moved the hands ever so slightly differently. And even the feet, I have changed the parameters so they're not moving exactly at the same intensity. That's just intensity though. What I really want to do is offset this animation to make it asymmetrical. If I can make this asymmetrical by doing some offsetting, it'll make this even more visually interesting. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this animation, because now what I'm going to do is offset my animation. So let's go ahead and show the curves really quick. Okay, perfect. So now that we have this, what I want to do is go into the graph editor and offset some of these things, starting with my hips. Now, you have a couple options with the hips. You can make it so that your height is sooner. You can make it so that it is later. You could even keep it at the exact same point and then start offsetting things from the hips. So I think I'm going to do that. To keep it simple, I'm going to keep my animation in the same place for the hips. So what I'm going to do is now offset everything beyond that. So I'm going to start subtly. Sorry, my friends keep texting me. YouTube hears this now. Okay, awesome. That's gonna keep ringing, but that's okay. All right, so let's start offsetting this spine here. So I'm just going to play around with this. I want you to see what happens if I were to move this a couple frames forward. Actually, just one frame forward. So if I move that one frame forward, I'm going to move this 2 frames forward. I'm going to move this 3 frames forward just to see what happens. So I'm going to click on that. Let's just play this to see what happens. Okay, so it actually feels really stiff at that point right there. I don't think I like that. So that's okay, because I saved this. I can always go back, or I can just Control Z. And let's go ahead and turn on the nerve curves again. Let me turn on Karnak really quick so you can see my key bindings. It's usually, okay, it's right there, perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and turn that on. Perfect, okay. Oh my gosh, okay. Sorry, YouTube, and anyone watching this. My friends keep texting me and it's, oh, quiet you. Okay, hold on. Okay, cool. All right. My phone should be quiet now. All right, cool beans. So we have this offset, and let's just go back. Let's just go back and see. What happens if I go the other direction. So if I have this, and I encourage all of you, this is definitely the assignment to goof around in. Have fun with your idle cycle. Mess around with it. See what happens when you do X, Y, and Z. So if I'm going 2 there, and let's just go 3 back here. And honestly, I have an idea of what's going to happen, but I just want to show you all exactly what it would look like if I decided to do it the opposite direction. So again, feels relatively stiff. So with that in mind, I am going to show my controllers again. I'm going to move these, but I'm going to keep these now on frame 30, and I'm going to offset things from the hip instead. So let me get the hip. And you know what? I'm going to move the hip a couple frames up, just for fun. And just, oh my God, my phone. Okay, sorry. I'm throwing my phone outside my office. 1 second. Okay, we're good. All right. So now that we have that, my hip is in place. I am going to alter things accordingly. So if I'm coming down on frame 32, I actually want my shoulders to kind of have a little bit of a delay. So as they're coming down, I want these to delay further. And you know what? Actually, no, I lied. I'm keeping the hips at 30. I'm making this easy for myself. I don't want this to be more complicated than it has to be. So I'm going to offset this. I want these arms to hang a little bit and then come down. So I'm going to go to frame, let's say 33. And it's going to make them hang a little bit more. Same thing with these arms right here. I want these to come down after maybe say 35. And I definitely want an offset on these. I don't want these coming down at the same time. So I'm going to trim this down. And that's already making it more visually interesting. Same with the shoulders. If this is going to delay a little bit more, I'm going to make that come down a little bit, maybe by 1 frame. So things aren't happening at the exact same frame anymore. Things are more visually interesting. And now even just looking at this, you can see that just the upper body is becoming more visually interesting. Ever so slightly differences by the frame, but it's going to make our animation more appealing. So now I'm going to get the head, and I definitely want this to kind of come down even later. So that's looking interesting. You know what? Maybe just a couple frames more, just to see what it looks like. That looks pretty cool. Awesome. So now that I have that, next thing I'm going to do, and this is honestly probably going to break my brain, but I'm going to do it anyway. I really want to offset these fingers because they're all coming down at the same exact time. And to make that even more interesting, I definitely want the index finger to hang out the most, and then I want everything to kind of come in. So let's just look at this hand explicitly. Let's just look at this hand. So if I'm playing this, this is coming out. I want this finger to stay out a little bit more, the index finger here. So I'm going to take this index finger. I'm going to save again, save scene as, because when I start messing with the controllers, that's when things like to crash. So let's call this cycle 5. And this will be the last part of the tutorial. So I want this index finger to kind of hang out a little bit longer. Now, as you can see, I only have access to this frame from this controller. So what do? Do I just move this? Well, no, if I do that, things are still moving at the same rate. I don't want that. But if you look inside the graph editor, you can see my controllers are keyed right here. So even though I can't see the individual key controls here, I can see them in my graph editor. So if I'm going to the index finger, again, I want that to hang out the longest. So I'm going to, actually, you know what? I'm actually going to keep that there. No, I lied. I want that to come out a few frames. So cut that to, you know what? Yeah, actually, let's do this. I want this whole thing, both of them actually, to come to frame 34. And this is what I'm going to do. Use the thinky bits of my brain. So this one I actually want to be offset ever so slightly. We'll do it at 36. So now I know that all of my fingers will be extended on this hand on frame 34. Okay, they come out at 34 and then they come out at the same time. This one comes out at frame 36. So at frame 36, this is the maximum and then they come down at the same time. But if I want to offset them, I can click on this hand. I can go down to the index finger. I definitely want this index finger to come last. So because I want it to come last, I'm going to have that index finger stay there. What's next? Let's check this out. The middle finger. So because the middle finger is next, I'm going to go to this controller and I'm going to have that middle finger come down one frame. And you know what? I'm actually having that come any further. Okay, so we've got that. And again, pardon me in advance. This is still something that melts my brain doing. So in a perfect world, to be honest, I would actually hand key this instead. I'm not usually accustomed to animating from the graph editor. So aforementioned warning, I am not incredibly confident about what I am doing right now. If I were to do this the way I would want to, I would animate this by hand. So let's see. So I have this. The index is hanging out here. My middle finger is going to be coming in sooner. And then last but not least, my ring finger. And then my pinky will come afterwards. So let's see what happens if I do this. I still feel like they're coming at the same rate. So let's get the pinky last. I just want to see what happens if I were to. Okay, so they feel really dead right here. Okay, so I'm going to be completely honest with you. If you want to, you're more than welcome to tinker around with this. Like I've said before, I highly recommend that every individual mess around with this. However, as I'm messing around with this, I'm finding that I am having a challenging time. So rather than make this more complicating for myself, I'm just going to show you the way that I would do it. So let me bring all of these fingers back really quick. And you know what? Let's make this easier. I'm just going to reopen my scene. There is nothing wrong with that, by the way. So if at any point in time you're like, oh man, I'm really not feeling this, then there's no problem with you going in individually. So if I were to find these, what I would want to do is, first and foremost, here is the challenge that I have. And anytime you're having a challenge with animation, think about the steps to fix it. My challenge is, I want these hands to kind of curl in asymmetrically. I have two options. The option number one is my methodology, where I hand key this myself and I get that desired effect because, again, my animation brain isn't good at processing what Maya does very well yet. So what I would do is, if I were to look at this finger is coming in here. I would preferably like to do this in block. Generally speaking, if I were to do even an idle, I would try to block it out, and then I would fine tune my fingers in my advanced blocking stage. But because I don't have that, I will attempt to do this by hand. So by this frame, I want this finger, this index finger, to be extended still. So let's look at the index finger. Actually, let's just do this. I'm going to key this. So now I have this keyed, and I can keyframe exactly how I want these fingers from this controller. So now that I have that keyframed, I can manipulate how I want the fingers to look on this frame. So this pinky, I feel, should be coming in relatively soon, like so. Again, I can see that it's going to end up at this point. So as long as I'm not going beyond this, because that'll be weird. Yeah, that looks weird. So as long as I'm not going beyond that, I'm fine. So now that I have that, and as you can see, it'll ease in, I'm going to go down the fingers. And I just want to see where I want my fingers to look. So I've got that. Let's see, and I'll move the fingers down this way. And then I don't want this index finger to move too much, so I'm just going to do that. And now when I play this, let's see if it makes it more visually interesting. All right, still feels stiff, but it's achieving the effect that I want. Now, what is it about my animation that is making it feel stiff? It's not really moving further. Or there's not really any offset after I get to the end of the animation. So with that said, I kind of want this to move in a little bit for the index finger, because everything's moving and then the index finger just kind of goes stiff. What I want is the index finger to actually come in a little bit, maybe even at this point right here. So I'm going to put a keyframe there, and I want this to actually come in a little bit. So when you play it, see if I can go back to this this and this. Okay, so let's make this even more subtle, so it doesn't give me that popping sensation. And let's see about cleaning that up too. Perfect, let's do that. Okay, and pretty soon we're going to be getting to the point, which is my favorite, the infinity cycles. Okay, so I actually want this to come out, this to come in, without getting that popping effect. And I think I'm getting that popping effect because of how these things are looping together. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do to keep things incredibly simple for the sake of this demo, because I don't want to spend too much time with me noodling around. So, because if you leave it up to me, I love screwing around in Maya. So, here's what we're going to do. I am now going to say that this is complete for now, and I'm going to put what I call the final touch on this animation. And that final touch will hopefully fix this little problem that I have right here on the fingers, making them feel more alive. So, to combat that, simply, here is the only thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go in all of my controls, select my controls, select objects. I'm going to select all of these. Before I do that, I'm going to save scene as, because worst case scenario, I can come back to this particular spot, and I know with confidence, I can always come back to this spot before I mess around with it too much. So I have all of these selected. Now, the next thing you want to do is, as you can tell, my animation looks a little poppy, especially when the finger's coming in. So here's what you have to do. At some point down the line, I'm only going to have 59 frames, because I'm literally playing the same exact frame twice. And simply by doing that, it actually makes the animation ever so slightly smoother, because I am not replicating a same frame. When you have a duplicate frame, that's when things pause or get a little jittery. So at a certain point down the line, I'm going to go to frame 59 instead of 60, and I will render out 59 frames instead of the 60 that I initially had. Again, the reason we do that is because you do not want a duplicate frame. It's going to make your animation a little bit more stiff. So again, before I do that, here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to select all my controllers. Select them all. I'm going to select everything inside of the graph editor. I'm going to go to curves, pre-infinity. I'm going to cycle. For post-infinity, I'm going with cycle. And then last but not least, I'm going to go to view, and I'm going to select infinity. Selecting infinity allows you to see all of your cycle if you were to continue playing it onward. Now, the cool thing about this is, if you remember earlier in the class, I haven't made a video about this yet, but earlier in the class, I demonstrated a run cycle, and I copied and pasted all of the run cycle, I think up to like 90 frames, which is ridiculous, mind you. The reason I did that the hard way is to demonstrate that you can copy and paste if you wanted to, or you can put on curves post pre-infinity to cycle, put view onto infinity, and now look what happens when I extend my animation beyond 60 frames. Let's just say I make it 200, or something divisible by 60, 120. Let's say I make it 120. Actually, no, it's crazy. 180. Let's do 180. So if I were to play this, even though I did not animate anything beyond frame 60, the animation is continuing to go infinitely. The reason why this is invaluable is because when I go back to 60 and I zoom in on one of these controllers, let's just say it's the hip controller, and let's say perfect. Now I can see exactly how my animation is looping. I don't know about everyone watching this video, but this is incredibly ugly to look at. It's not smooth at all. As you can see, I have a little bump here, and that is what's contributing to some of the weirdness going on in my animation rig. So to combat that, all you have to do is select these, break them, break the tangent, and now what I can do is I can go here and I can individually fix, let's see if it'll let me, I can individually fix now my curves. So let me select this one, and boom. Now I have a smooth curve. This is hands down my favorite thing to do anytime I am doing an animation cycle. When my cycle's looking good and I've got it in place and I'm like, yes, this is perfect, the offsetting is right, this is where I'll go into Maya in the graph editor and I'll start cleaning up and ironing out these curves so I don't get these weird waves. The reason we want to do this is because it'll make our cycle even smoother. So if I play this, and if I play this even better at frame 59 instead, now I know that this next frame is easing into this last one, or this last frame is now easing into the first. So let's go ahead and play that. And just look at how much smoother that feels on the hips. It feels like it's actually going somewhere instead of pausing or looking like Maya is a computer generating this animation, which technically it is, but now even cleaner. So now that we have that, the next thing we're going to do is just go down the line. And let's see, I've got the translate X, you can go to translate Y. This is looking infinitely better than the X. Let's look at this one. This one looks terrible. This one looks like a hillside. So let's go ahead and fix this one. I'm going to select this and then that one. We're going to break both of these tangents like so. And when I break the tangent, what I want to do is I want to select this end right here and I want it to ease into this next one. The easiest way to do this is honestly just look at the direction of your tangent and you want it to try to match as closely as possible the line of your arc. So once this is smoothed out, I'm going to go to this one right here. I'm going to select this side. Remember, this one's not going to do anything. It's not influencing at all in any way, shape, or form. You could, if you want to, move it here if you wanted to. But this is really going to be the one that determines what happens. So if I were to play this now, let's see. Okay, so forward and back motion. So if I were to play this now, this is going to speed up at the end. And then it's going to look really weird coming in because it's slowing down here. I don't want that to slow down. I want it to ease into each other in a smooth arc. So I'm going to select that tab or that tangent, and I'm going to move that down. So now I have a much smoother infinity. So now when I play this, both my X, my translate Y, and my translate Z should be smooth. And it looks like I don't have any rotations here. In a perfect world, I would actually, you know what, screw it, I'm changing that. Yep, okay. I should have rotation on the hips as well. Let's see how much that changes it though. Oh, that's way better. Okay, yeah, cool. Almost forgot to put some rotation on there. And you know what, to push that even further, I want to rotate this ever so slightly, like so. That's even more visually interesting. Cool, awesome. I'm glad I caught that. So now that we have that, we have smooth rotations on all axes. Perfect, awesome. So that's just the hip. Now what I would do is I would go down the line. For my feet, generally speaking, they should be okay. Remember, I didn't move them anywhere except for on the rock. So as you can see, the rock is looking weird. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the tutorial, I think it was the last one, the reason why we're having this weird kink is because it's way, way too close. Or, oh man, it's going to do it again. Oh no, sorry, my mistake. So, at first you might think like, oh, well, what's happening here? Why is this weird kink existing? Why can't I get rid of it? It's getting weirder. The reason is because the kink is actually on this side right here. This is what's overextended. So if I push that back, this immediately begins to smooth out. And rather than allowing Maya to tell me what I want, I'm going to tell Maya that I do not want this weird kind of axis that you've got going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this tangent. Again, this is a good example because I can't see the X or the Y axis on this foot at all. But despite that, I still animated it. And I animated on the rock. So what I'm going to do is fix the tangent here. So I've got this. And remember, I'm going to move this up. Just get hold of it. Perfect. I'm going to move this up. I'm going to try to line this up with the arc. I'm going to the other side, like so. And I'm going to select this side, make sure we break the tangent. And I'm going to smooth it into this arc. So now I have a nice, beautiful arc on the rock. And it's going to be so much smoother. So I'm not going to show you me doing this entire thing. I will be doing this in class, however, just to show everyone how I would complete this. But just so you all know, I would go into every single control that is animated, and I would make sure that my arcs are nice and smooth out. I would then go to frame 59 so that I do not duplicate a second frame, because remember, the first frame and the last frame are exactly the same, but you do not want a duplicate, otherwise you're going to get a stall or a hiccup. So I'm going to press 59 instead. Remember, assuming that I have cleaned up every single controller, I would go to frame 59, and then I would go ahead and play blast this. So I would play blast this as 59 frames instead of the 60, because again, I don't want that extra frame. I think I'm just going to render from this camera really quick just for the sake of demonstration. Perfect. And so now if I were to put this into Sync Sketch, it would play perfectly. And it's only 2 seconds long. So that is the end of this tutorial. Again, just so everyone knows, this is by no means done. I would go back into every single individual controller, and I would make sure that every single one is smoothed out before finally finishing it. I would definitely do this on the fingers. If I were to take a look at this right now, let me just look at the index, and boom, see, this is what is giving me this weird hiccup right here. I'm getting this weird bounce. So if I were to fix that, what I would do is I would again go to frame 60 instead, so I can see what this looks like. At frame 60, I can see that my finger is giving me this weird kind of wonkiness. Obviously, this is too far out, so I'm going to pinch this in. I'm going to break this tangent. And you know what? Let's just see if this actually does fix my finger. That way you don't think I'm just kind of giving you information just to give it to you. But let's go to that one. Now that we're there, let's go to this one, clean this one up a little bit. I'm going to break that tangent, take that back part, and smooth that in. And let's just see if that makes the finger look smoother, especially when I set it to frame 59 instead. So let's go ahead and play that. All right, so still feels a little stiff, but it feels a lot smoother than it did before. If I were to actually change this even further, let me show you what I would do if I were to fix this even further. To be honest, I would extend this out. Let's just see what that does. And already that feels significantly smoother. I would go down the line and fix my fingers so they feel even smoother. I'm not going to do that now because again, if I let myself, I'm going to animate forever. So again, for the sake of this assignment, if you want to push your animation even further, this is how I would do it. Then and only then after doing this, I would say you're more than welcome to start practicing fidgets, but that is a lesson for another time. Thank you everyone for watching. Hopefully this is of help to you. And as always, if you have any questions, do not be afraid to hit me up in the Discord. All right?